The Emirates NBA Cup is here, and you can win big getting in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All 30 teams split into 6 groups every Tuesday and Friday, playing for the right to advance in the single elimination in-season tourney, culminating in the NBA Cup championship in Vegas. We have a new favorite on DraftKings. The New York Knicks are actually favored to win the NBA Cup right now at plus 500, with the Cleveland Cavaliers with the second best odds at plus 550. First time, here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. Well, we got what I think has been the biggest regular season game to this point in the NBA season. The only other game that I felt was this important, other than the opening night ones, just because it's all exciting because NBA basketball is back, was that the Warriors-Celtics game a few weeks ago. But this one felt like an important test for the Cleveland Cavaliers, who got off to a 15-0 start. Obviously not the perfect rendition of what this matchup would look like. Kristaps Porzingis is a very important part of the Boston Celtics and their ability to attack specific matchups. And obviously we had a bunch of guys out for Cleveland, specifically in their wing core, with Dean Wade out, Isaac Okoro out, Max Strus out, and Karis LeVert out. And those are guys that you need for this type of matchup. But still, we got at least a vague look at what these two teams look like matching up against each other. And the Celtics kind of controlled it for the most part. Cavs got it close a few times, but the Celtics got out of there with a win. We're going to break the game down from the perspective of both teams. And then at the tail end of the show, we are doing a mailbag. So drop mailbag questions in the chat, and Paul's going to send them over to me, and we'll hit a bunch of mailbag questions at the tail end of the show. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at @JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight, don't forget it's helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. We also have new social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where we're releasing a bunch of reels and other content, so make sure you follow there. And then last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. We are doing a mailbag on Friday that I'm recording on Thursday, and I'm going to be grabbing the comments from yesterday's video, today's videos, and from tomorrow's for that specific mailbag. So make sure you drop. As a matter of fact, we don't have a new video coming out tomorrow. So tomorrow will be your last chance, or excuse me, this video will be the last one this week where you can drop mailbag questions for Friday's mailbag. So make sure you get that in there, but also drop mailbags in the chat so that we can hit some at the tail end of this show tonight. All right, let's talk some basketball. So one of the most important functions that I was looking for in this particular matchup was Boston's ability to attack Cleveland's entry points. This is something I've talked a lot about with the decision for the Cavs to kind of go all in on the Garland-Mitchell backcourt, right? So an entry point is a method with which you get a defense into rotation. When you get a defense into rotation, then even the good defenders are sprinting at guys, and that's just easier to handle, right? Like if I put you on an island against Lou Dort, you're going to have a real hard time scoring. But if I put him 20 feet away from you or 15 feet away from you and I make him sprint at you, you're probably going to be able to either get a three-point shot off, or if he sells out at the three-point shot, you might be able to drive past him and make something happen, right? Like even the best defenders in the world, when they're put into disadvantageous situations, can struggle to contain the basketball, right? And that's where you can expand your advantage and end up getting a wide open three or a layup or something along those lines, right? But against most of the teams in the NBA, you can hide your entry points. So if you've got a really good on-ball defender, multiple really good on-ball defenders, and you've got big guys that can defend in ball screens and switch and do all that different stuff, then you can hopefully take your weakest defender and you can hide them on the most limited offensive player on the other team, and you can do a bunch of different things to cover for them, right? So if he's a guy that can't be a movement shooter, meaning he can't set a screen and then slip out of it and quickly get his feet set and knock down a three, then you can ask your offense or defensive player to hedge and recover because he can throw a hedge to stop the ball handler from driving, but he can still recover to that limited offensive player that's going to struggle to shoot on the move, right? Or you can pre-switch where it's like, oh, they're going to try to attack this guy. Why don't we just send a better defender up and just switch as the guy's running up to set the screen, right? There's a bunch of different things you can do to hide a limited defensive player. But eventually you run into a team like the Boston Celtics. And they're not the only team like this. There are several teams like this around the league. I think Oklahoma City fits this mold as well. But they're teams that have lots of really high-level offensive players on the floor. You run out of places to hide guys, right? And in that sort of situation, all of a sudden you find out really quickly just how easy it is to break down a defense by attacking a specific weak point. And in this particular game, by virtue of the injuries, there were two entry points for the Cavs at the start of the game with Darius Garland and Sam Merrill. And Boston was just relentlessly attacking those two. That was a big part of why we ended up getting to see a lot of Craig Porter Jr. in this game, because they were trying to make sure that there were fewer weak points on the court that they could look to attack, right? When you have those weak points and you get the defense into rotation, it just doesn't matter anymore. And that's how you end up with a barrage from the three-point line like what you saw from Boston tonight. I thought it was really interesting. I asked Paul, our producer, to keep an eye out on the Twitter feed if any news comes out, but like Jared Allen didn't play down the stretch. And so then it ended up being a lot of Georges Niang. And that's another entry point. And you guys saw how it was like Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum just felt like we can get whatever we want against Georges Niang. I thought Jayson Tatum did a really nice job attacking him. One of the things that Jayson Tatum's been doing lately that he's always done this, but I feel like he's doing it a little bit more this year, is one of his biggest athletic strengths is that he's big and strong. And so he's been doing this move where like he's getting dribble penetration without having to like make some sort of super aggressive launching athletic move. And what he'll do is like he'll face up on the guy and he'll throw, maybe throw a little jab step, but then he'll open up that right shoulder and he'll jab with that right foot out almost to the left where he's almost got his shoulder turned. And when he's there, he can get into a step back. But what he can also do is he can use that right leg to almost like slow motion start his drive. And then when he's ready to drive, he can put the ball on the floor with his left hand and clear out with his right arm. That just creating space with his strength, which I think is really smart. And that's how he got his last couple drives to the rim. God, Tatum was so good in this game. But like, it just doesn't matter if Georges Niang wants to slide his feet. Like Tatum just needs this tiny little bit of an angle so that he can use his upper body strength to get the leverage to get all the way to the rim. And then just playing off of 2 feet to draw fouls and to get quality looks around the rim. He was torching them. That Tatum White two-man game has been something that's been a staple for the Boston offense forever, but they were going to it a lot to attack guys like Sam Merrill and Darius Garland. And one of the things you saw is like that's the difference between attacking a team like Boston and attacking a team like Cleveland, right? There were stretches in this game where you could see Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland and Evan Mobley be like, oh, like Peyton Pritchard's on the floor. Let's run this screening action to get him switched on to Evan Mobley, and then let's just go to Evan Mobley on the block, and he can score over Peyton Pritchard. Or like Nimi Queta's on the floor, we can attack him in his drop coverage. Or like they're different. They did a lot of attacking Sam Hauser in this particular game, right? So like there are guys that are on the bench that you can look to attack with Boston, but like with their starting lineup, there's just not a good entry point. Your best entry point was there was a stretch of this game where, and Boston will do switching with Horford too, and Horford's just really good at switching. But like one of the things that that Boston was doing in this game is they were running a good amount of deep drop coverage with Horford. So like Donovan Mitchell was able to get into some of his pull-up jump shot game against that deep drop coverage. But like when Boston wants to, and they put that 5 out there and they start switching everything, it's like take your pick. Like where do you want to attack? There's not really a great option for you there for you to go at. And then again, it's one of those things when there's one entry point on the floor, it's a little easier to cover for than when there's 2. And I thought that was the big thing that really stood out in this game. And it's kind of the reality of Cleveland's roster, which is like, it won't always be Sam Merrill, right? Like that's probably going to be Max Strus. Max Strus is a very good switching defender. He can switch onto different types of forwards. He can do a lot of really impactful defending in a switching scheme. But Darius Garland always is going to be out there, and he's always going to be a guy that they can look to attack in space. And it's just something to keep in mind in terms of that matchup in the big picture, right? Because like there's a lot of different like variables in this game. Like Boston shot 22 for 41 from three. When Boston shoots that well, you just get to lose. And like Boston did a lot of like really tough shot making in this game, in addition to their high level offense where they generated great catch and shoot looks, right? So like there's a sequence in the end of the first half where it's like Jaylen Brown comes flying off of like a off ball cut from the right wing to the top of the key. And Evan Mobley, there's like two screeners around the elbows, and Evan Mobley decides to go underneath the picks, as he should. It's like you got to meet Jaylen Brown on the other side, and the screens were being set damn near at the 3-point line. So Jaylen Brown caught the ball like 26 feet from the rim. And if Jaylen Brown's going to catch the ball 26 feet from the rim on the move and shoot, you kind of would rather concede that than give up a drive by chasing him over the top of that, right? Well, Jaylen Brown made it because Jaylen Brown can make it. There are plays where it's like we're offering a little bit of nail help, and Peyton Pritchard is spotting up on the wing, but he's like 27 feet away. And it's like, that's a long above the break three, but like he can make that, right? The big one in this game is Derek White has been so good at this. There's an interchange and a switch, right? So like if Derek White's dribbling up the floor, he has an on-ball defender on him that's guarding him. And he gets a screening action, and there's a switch. The two defenders in the action, the one will step off and the other one will step in, right? And the one that's stepping off is trying to get inside the guy who's screening for him because you don't want to give up that inside seal slip that Boston torches people with, right? Which is like, oh, you're switching? Cool. Well, Tatum's just going to screen you from behind instead of on the side, and then he's just going to slip, and he's got inside position. Now he's wide open on a roll. Now it's a 4-on-3, and your defense is screwed, right? Like, so like you're trying to back off on the ball to get inside position on the switch. And then that second guy who's guarding the screener has to get out there. But in that interchange, there's a gap. And Derek White is like a master at like waiting for that gap and just rising and firing right over the top. And like there were a lot of those where Cleveland was pretty quick on their switch, and they're there on the catch or on that switch ready to contest. And Derek White just can make it because Derek White's an elite shooter. And there are stretches in fights against Boston where like you just kind of hang on for dear life because they're making tough shots and hope to God that you're still in the game by the time they cool off and start having to execute on offense again. And like there's a certain amount of like Boston had a great shooting night tonight, you know, right? But like the flip, and if you're a Cavs fan too, you're thinking like, okay, well, we're going to have better perimeter defenders on the floor. We're going to have better opportunity to contain in our switching. But like, as you watch that game, there was some difficulty that Darius Garland had creating shots at the rim. I thought he was challenging athletes at the rim and was struggling to make shots. And it's like at a certain point, Boston's players are just a little bit better. And that's something that I think is going to be difficult. And I don't think you come out of that game discouraged if you're a Cavs fan, because I think you hung tight, right? Like Boston had a great shooting night. You had a bunch of guys out and you were in it. But at the same time, like every time Cleveland got close, Boston pulled away again. And then Cleveland would get close, and then Boston would pull away again because Boston had the ability to leverage their advantages when things got tight. And it was weird because I thought it was like a sign of just how serious the Cavs are. And I think at this point, if you're not looking at the Cavs as the obvious 2 seed at worst in the Eastern Conference, then I think you're underestimating them. I think they're obviously better than teams like Milwaukee and Philly and New York at this point. Like the Cavs are damn good. But like, the Boston Celtics are the class of the NBA for good reason, and I thought they demonstrated it tonight just with the way they've maintained control of the game. I cannot say enough about how impressed I was with Jayson Tatum just in his overall like calm demeanor throughout the game. Every time it felt like things got out of control, he was able to settle them down and generate great shots. The game is really slowing down for him this year in a big way. His playmaking has been through the roof over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks. I thought it was a really, really impressive performance from Boston, even against a feisty Cavs performance as well. Again, I'm really curious to see why Jared Allen didn't play, because if he was hurt, then maybe that was just a simple decision to take care of his body. I get it from the standpoint of spacing. Like, okay, well, we want to have 5 shooters on the floor, so why don't we do it this way? And Georges Niang obviously gives you that extra bit of shooting in that situation. But like with Boston, they're just too good at picking apart your weak links on the defensive end of the floor, and you gift wrapped a mismatch there. Like Tatum was going right at him. There was a play late in the game where Jaylen Brown's like, I don't want a screen. Stay away. I got him. Like, I can score on this dude. Like, give me my space. I'm going to go to work here, right? One other note that I thought was fascinating from this game, there were some stretches for the Cavs where they got a little bit out of control with overhelping. and ended up giving up some really good threes. The stretch right at the end of the first half, it was like a 5-point game with like 4 minutes left. And there were multiple overhelps for no damn reason. Craig Porter Jr. had a big one off the left wing, and then they had a on the right wing overhelp at the nail where they gave up Peyton Pritchard a wide open three. But like they gave up a couple of wide open threes. And then do you guys remember those two wide open Jayson Tatum threes at the end of the half? The two wide open Jayson Tatum threes, he was inbounding on the sideline and nobody was guarding him. Literally nobody. So he just threw the ball into the corner, took a step in, got the ball back, and knocked down the three. It's like if you're trying to beat Boston, you can't have mistakes where you forget to guard their best player on a possession, right? There was another one where Tatum had the ball, Mitchell was on him. They brought Garland's man up into a screen. This was like right after that shot. And there was a screen, and Darius Garland should have switched. Donovan Mitchell certainly thought he was going to switch. Nobody guarded Tatum. Tatum just took 2 dribbles to his left and got into a wide open off the dribble three off the left wing. And it's like, let's zoom in on this, right? So like we all agree Boston's the best team in the league. That I think is pretty much consensus around the league at this point. Do I think Boston is unbeatable the way like the 2017 Warriors are? No. Like that team had Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, all in their athletic primes with Andre Iguodala. That team was just completely stacked with like apex talent. That team I legitimately believed was unbeatable. This Boston team, I think, is far and away the best team in the league, but I think that you can beat them in a series. I think it's possible. But they're going to go into every series as a heavy favorite. I will pick them in every series. We all should, because they're the best team. But if you're going to beat them, there are several things that you have to do. And the first line item is you can't make a bunch of mistakes. Because if you make a bunch of mistakes, now you're trying to overcome a talent advantage and you're spotting them points. That's where you can end up in a lot of trouble. 2, you've got to play defensive lineups with switchability and with fewer options to attack off the dribble, right? That means that guy at the 3 has to be a player that you trust to be able to guard multiple Boston shot creators. Having Max Strus back will help. Having Dean Wade back will help. Having Isaac Okoro back will help. Having Karis LeVert will help, no doubt. But within that scheme, you have to switch and you cannot make mistakes on overhelp situations that put Boston in rotation, or your defense in rotation against Boston. If you're in rotation against Boston, you're dead on arrival. That's when they get their wide open catch and shoot threes. You have to try to force them into tough shot making, and the only way you can do that is switch, contain, stay home off the ball. It's a very difficult job, but that is what you have to do. Now, Cleveland, it's going to be tricky with that Darius Garland piece because they are going to continue to look to attack him every single time they get a chance if they meet each other in a series. But there's a bunch of different things you have to do. The third piece is you got to make shots. There were a lot of good looks that Cleveland got tonight that they did not hit. That's one of those things where like you can't be in a situation where you're just getting flat out outgunned either. And so again, execution, avoiding errors, putting together switchable lineups and not making mistakes where you put your defense in rotation, and you got to make shots. And like that's the pathway, right? And you got to do that 4 times in 2 weeks. That's just what makes this team so difficult to imagine getting beat at this point in the season. Very, very interesting early regular season game. I thought it was a very impressive performance from the Boston Celtics. I thought they were a lot more in control than what the scoreboard would lead you to believe. Every time I see a game like that where like a team gets close but can't ever get over the hump, that's always an indicator to me that like, oh, well, that team, the team that was in control just felt like anytime they needed to get a couple of buckets and a couple of stops, they were able to. And that's kind of what it felt like. Oh, they got it to 2? Well, it's back to 7 because Darius Garland got his shit blocked off the glass, and now Derek White's hitting a 3 in transition on the other end. You know, like that is the kind of sequence that just kind of seemed to happen every single time Cleveland got back into that game. But there's a pathway. They just need to be sharper than they showed tonight. All right. If you guys have questions, make sure you drop them to Paul in the chat. Let's get started here. This is from Stevie. Hey, Jason, big fan of the show. At what point do you think the Celtics need Porzingis playing and healthy to be able to advance? I believe they need him against Cleveland as well as the finals. Boston's good enough that if Porzingis never suited up again this year, I'd still consider them to be the favorite. That said, it's just so much more in the way of margin for error when you have him out there. It gives you margin too for like what if Al Horford goes down with an injury for a certain amount of time, right? Or like what if one of your primary shot creators goes down, like someone like a Derek White or Jaylen Brown goes down for a certain amount of time. Like having Porzingis there helps. The difference is like the Eastern Conference is so weak that like Boston could literally like take the ultimate cautious approach this year and still get no worse than the 2 seed. So the Western Conference is different, right? In the Western Conference, it's like such a bloodbath where it's like you have a bad couple of weeks, you're in the play-in. So like there's a level of urgency that there's a lack of urgency, I should say, with Boston within the regular season that makes me feel like I want Porzingis to take as long as needed. And I don't want him to set foot on an NBA court until he is literally 100% ready. Not 99% ready, 100% ready. It's very different if you're running into a postseason series that starts in 2 weeks. You might be like, hey, if you're 95%, we want you ready to go in 2 weeks, right? But like I would take your sweet time with Porzingis. As far as like the specific matchup stuff, again, like we saw that in the NBA Finals in particular in Game 1 with Porzingis, where it's like his ability to punish mismatches at the elbows with quick like face up post up stuff is just so valuable to beating switching schemes, which as we talked about, like you need to switch against Boston. It's the only way to keep them out of rotation. So if you have to switch against Boston to keep them out of rotation, then you can't you have to hold up on the other side of it, right? So like mistake making is botching switches, giving up slips. That's when you're going to get in rotation. Now you're just dead on arrival, right? But if you do the right thing and you switch appropriately, you switch aggressively to take away the pull-up shots from guys like Derek White in the switch interchange, and you take away those inside seals, now it turns into a post-up game or an ISO game, right? And like Porzingis is just another way to attack in those one-on-one situations when they need to. This is from Lanzetta. Hey, Jason, what are your early thoughts on the Rockets' young core? They seem to be putting it together, especially Tari Eason and Men Thompson defensively. I did a little bit of a dive into the Rockets yesterday, and then I also broke down the Rockets-Bucks game in a good amount of detail with some film in today's show. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, I recommend that you do. I'm a huge fan of it, mainly from the standpoint of like where I see the game going. The Rockets are building around athletes, and I think that's really smart. Jalen Green, freaky athletic. Jabari Smith, great athlete. Tari Eason, great athlete. Amen Thompson, freaky athletic. They have layers of athleticism. It's like Cam Whitmore, super athletic. It's like, oh, here's Aaron Holiday. He's like a really quick guard, right? Reed Shepherd even brings a great amount of athleticism to the guard spot. They have like they went into last night's game with the Bucks with the fifth best record in the league. And what I thought was fascinating about that is like if you look at the top of the league and it's like, okay, we have Cleveland has best record, Golden State's right there. There's Boston, there's OKC, there's Houston. There was our top 5 records heading into last night's games. All 5 of them, freaky athletic teams that thrive in transition. And so I've really, really liked that build. And there have been extensive stretches of this season. And it goes beyond, when I talk about speed, it goes beyond just transition too. It's like, it's the transition game on both ends. It's the pace and space game on both ends, meaning like your ability to drive and kick teams or to handle drive and kick teams by containing the ball and rotating. But a big part of it is ball pressure. The ability to get up into ball handlers, be physical at the point of attack, make teams uncomfortable early in possession so that they're playing late in the clock and having to rush bad shots, right? Or fighting guys off a spot so that they're out of rhythm. That's a huge part of success on the defensive end in the modern NBA. There have been games that Houston's won with ball pressure. Do you remember the game where I don't even remember who they were playing, but when Tari Eason got the back-to-back steals and took it the other way for transition layups and then like literally laid on his back on the floor like huffing and puffing because he was so exhausted. Like they bring layers of guys that can get into the ball and make you uncomfortable. And it's a big part of what makes them so successful defensively. I just think again they came into tonight with the 23rd ranked half-court offense. It's a lot of like depending on Fred VanVleet to create shots, and Jalen Green's decision making is still super sketchy. But so that, like I don't think they're going to do much this year just because how limited they are offensively in the half court. But the direction they're going is one that I really like, which is like Jalen Green starting to increase his 3-point volume. Tons of athletes. We're ball pressuring. We're defending on the perimeter. We're running in transition on both ends. I even like the Şengün stuff where he's acting as a fulcrum at the top of the key. There was a Fred VanVleet layup against the Bucks last night where Şengün had the ball at the top of the key and they ran one of those classic like kind of screen and slip situations, and Fred VanVleet ended up getting an easy layup in the lane. They got a lot of good stuff that they're getting out of that. I'm a fan of Houston. I just think they're probably a year or two away from some of their ultimate goals. From Billstone, when evaluating players, how much do you take turnovers or assist to turnover ratio into account? I think it's undervalued. It's actually, ironically, it's one of the first things I look at when I'm looking at role players, because they tend to have super low assist totals and super low turnover totals. But like when I see a role player that gets like 2 assists per game, but like less than 1 turnover per game, that's a big part of the drive and kick system, right? So like there are a lot of situations where role players have to make reads, right? And that's like the decision zone, right? So like you catch the ball on the perimeter, you pump fake, or you have a guy running at you, you beat him off the dribble. Now you're standing at the elbow with a live dribble in basically what's a 5-on-4 situation. That's a difficult bit of processing. You only have a 25% advantage there. You have 5 players to 4, right? So like you have your advantage and you have to quickly process where the next read is. And so with role players in particular, assist to turnover ratio is one that I track a lot. Now with primary ball handlers, I care more about overall assist volume early in their careers, because young players are going to make mistakes when you ask them to create shots off the dribble. And so with that, like a young player, a young guard, it's at 3.5, 4 turnovers a game. Some of that is just like the reality of him learning how to play at the NBA level. But like if I see a guy who's routinely putting up 6.5, 7 assists a night, that's a strong indicator for me. Like there's all this concern about Anthony Edwards and his playmaking. And I'm less concerned about it because I'm like, I want Anthony Edwards to score the basketball. That's what he is. Anthony Edwards is a scorer, right? But like when it comes to like last year in the playoff run, where he has an entire playoff run where I can't remember exactly how many assists he averaged, but it was like 7 or 8 assists for the entire playoff run. When I see that, I go like, I'm like this. This is a guy that can draw multiple defenders and make simple kick out reads, and like that assist volume is super valuable to me in terms of like his shot creation. So, in short, primary ball handlers early in their career more concerned about overall assist volume. Role players, I really like to look at assist to turnover ratio as a indicator of their ability to make reads off off of closeouts. All right, let's see. From Eric, what are things you look for during the season that change your opinions on teams? Man, this is a very loaded question. A couple things like do they have an elite unit? Like if I have a team that on a large sample size is a top 5 offense or a top 5 defense, that's always something I take seriously. If a team has no elite unit, that's always something that I view as an issue. Like if you're a middle of the pack on both ends of the floor, that's something I'm going to look at. Body language. The bad parts are part of the season. The Boston Celtics lost at home to the Atlanta Hawks the other night. There's a certain amount of that is just kind of like part of the 82 game regular season. It's a very long season, right? But I want to see those be few and far between. And so I always look at like how quickly teams get out of the dregs of the season when they don't have their motivation. That to me is why it matters so much to be higher in the standings. It's an indicator of just how seriously you're taking the night to night stuff over the course of the regular season. All right, let's see here. From King Tay, do you think in an OKC versus Boston matchup, OKC's lack of physicality with most of their guards could be an issue? I actually go the other way on that. They have a lot of strong guards. Like Lou Dort is a strong guard. Jalen Williams is a strong guard. Alex Caruso is a strong guard. Kayson Wallace is a strong guard. My main issue with OKC in a Boston matchup is experience. OKC's got a lot of firepower, but their number 2 is some combination of Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren, and those guys just don't have a lot of playoff experience. Boston, when Jayson Tatum is getting spelled, it's going to be Jaylen Brown and Derek White. And those are just guys that have a ton more experience. And so for me, like I like OKC's talent matchup with Boston. I don't like their experience matchup with Boston. But I don't view last year I thought OKC was too young to have any shot. I view Oklahoma City as a legitimate threat this year. All righty, let's see. Last question, then we're done for the night. How much does Quetta being the backup the backup big hurt the Celtics? Do they have any flexibility to acquire an upgrade? This is something I've talked a lot about this year. Like when it comes to Boston and some of the obsession about their defense and like how, like, I think they were still top 10, if I remember correctly, coming into the night. I don't really care all that much about Boston's like some of their metrics at this point in the season because like when they're whole, they have Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford playing all their center minutes. And like they're keeping Al Horford's minutes down. They're playing a lot of Queta and Cornette. And like those two guys are like they're perfectly fine rotation backup bigs, but at the championship level, they're guys that can be attacked, right? And so like there's a certain amount of like it's fun. They've turned a couple of guys into successful backup centers that I'm sure a couple teams around the league might have more use for than even Boston does. But at this point in the season, I'm not as worried about it because like again, even if I was the Boston Celtics and I'm like, oh, Porzingis isn't ready to go for the playoffs, we're gonna bring Horford up to 35 minutes and we're gonna play Cornette for 13 minutes a night. I still don't think that's enough of an issue to make Boston Celtics fans concerned about where they can get from there. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you for supporting the show. We have a couple of breakout clips coming out tomorrow. By the way, I had a couple of people ask, and I'll mention this again off the top in one of our other shows, but like people asking about like the difference between the different types of clips we release. If you look at the thumbnails, the full episodes always have the same thumbnail type, like layout. The breakout clips all have a different thumbnail. And then the Timpf's tape ones all have a different thumbnail. So you can tell just by looking at the thumbnail whether or not it's actually a full episode. Also, within the YouTube channel, there's a thread that's called full episodes. So anytime I actually am releasing something actually new, you can see that just by looking for the right thumbnail or looking under that full episodes piece. But we do have a couple of breakout clips coming out tomorrow. The film session from today's show, which was a breakdown of Rockets Bucks and the way I did a breakdown on like Norman Powell getting all those open shots at the tail end against Golden State and how that all worked. We also have this mailbag coming out tomorrow, but we'll be back on Thursday with a breakdown of all the games from Wednesday night. And then I'm recording that mailbag on Thursday. That's going to air on Friday. So that's the content schedule for the rest of this week. And then next week for Thanksgiving, we're going Monday, Tuesday, and then I'm going again Tuesday night for the in-season tournament slate. That one might run the following morning, but then we're taking the entire team for Hoops Tonight is taking Thanksgiving off from Wednesday through Sunday. So that kind of gives you guys the schedule. But I'm always active, like watching film on Twitter and like posting clips. Like tomorrow morning, I'm probably going to wake up and watch some Cavs-Celtics and just kind of thread some clips on Twitter. So make sure you follow me at _JasonLT to see that there. Again, as always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for rocking with me and rocking with the show. Fun game. Going to be a fun season. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next time.